Hello. We're gonna let folks get into the room. Hope everyone is having a good Tuesday. It's quite cold here. We'll just give it another minute. We have still quite a few folks who are joining. Appreciate everyone's timeliness. All right. I was gonna say I haven't seen the attendees list grow in a few seconds, and then a couple more people popped on, but that's okay. We're a minute or so after. Thank you all for joining us for this month's Be Informed session. Shreya, could we get next slide, please? So this is Be Informed, a hepatitis B virtual education series. Next slide, please. If you haven't been with us before, this is a series we host every other month, and it is done in webinar format. And so you all will be on mute, but we ask that you please utilize the chat and question and answer features. Please introduce yourself in the chat, give us your name and where you're from. And then any of the questions that you may have as this session progresses, please drop them in as you think of them. Sometimes we can answer them right then and there. Other times, as like Yasmin speaking, I can go and answer something. And we just know kind of it gives us a chance to also think of the answer ahead of Q&A time at the end. This is being recorded, and we will share the slides from this afterwards. We send these recordings out through our newsletter, and you can also find it on our website, hepbunited.org. Next slide, please. Wonderful segue. It's like, what is Hep B United? So we are a coalition of coalitions. We have more than now 60 local and national organizations across 37 cities and 27 states plus DC. It has been in existence for more than a decade, and really we provide capacity building services as well as other resources for organizations that are doing work on hepatitis B on the ground. That can be looking at it from a community standpoint, like Asian immigrants or African immigrant health, or it can be from a jurisdictional sense, so just within their community or county. Oftentimes we work with organizations that have a focus on other health issues and recognize then that hepatitis B is a serious co-condition or is just something that they found in their community and they weren't anticipating, but want to go and make sure that they respond to. So we work oftentimes trying to leverage other health system infrastructure for hepatitis B. Next slide, please. So I recognize many of the names here, but I will still go through what the Be Informed session is. And I realized I got to this point and didn't introduce myself. I always do this. My name is Frank Kuhn. I'm with the Hepatitis B Foundation. I'm their Associate Director of Policy and Partnerships. And I also direct the the Hep B United Coalition, which we just talked about. Normally I kick these off and then turn it over to other speakers, but I actually am one of the speakers today. So you're going to hear a lot from me, which is why Yasmin is here. So you don't only hear from me. Also, she's far better at her section than I am. So these sessions, though, were created just under 2 years ago as a way to create an echo style format for topics that were of interest to those working on hepatitis, either as advocates, someone living with the disease, their family, clinicians, and other public health supporters and educators. So to really give an opportunity to get kind of deep dive quick hits on specific topics, to provide case studies or other kind of expert testimony, if you will, and then have a forum for questions to be answered, and to do it all in about 45 minutes. So we host these every other month on the third Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And like I said, we do try to get them under an hour because we recognize attention spans get shorter towards the end of the day. You can find all of our existing sessions on the website, and it really does run the gamut. Our last session in November, we had partners from the CDC come in and speak about really speak about the impact of the new Hep B case definitions. So that recording is on the website. We've also had speakers come in and talk about grant making, using storytelling for education, really a variety of topics. So really recommend folks go and check those out on the website. And the next slide, please. So the schedule, I did kind of run through it, but this is what we're looking like timing wise. And then we'll move to the next slide, please. So today, the two speakers we have are myself and my colleague, Dr. Yasmin Ibrahim. And we're really looking at what happens this year based on some of the stuff that happened last year. So, often at the end of each year, we're like, hey, these are the wins or impacts of the year. And then we're like, oh, what's in the year ahead? But it doesn't always directly tie X to Y. And we had several different communities kind of say towards the end of 2024, as we were in other spaces, we as the foundation or the coalition, were talking about things that had happened in 2024. They're like, would that have an outcome? Like, is this going to impact me in 3 months or in 3 years? And we realize, it's kind of tough to, unless we really set a space aside to go into what has happened and what will come out of that kind of in a laundry list. We won't necessarily, people won't necessarily be informed. So we were going to take this opportunity to really spend a few minutes on 6 different occurrences that happened in the hepatitis B space in 2024, and look at what their impact could be in 2025 and beyond. And so with that, we'll just move right in. And as I said, any questions, please feel free to dive in, drop them into the chat. So next slide, please. All right. So I'm taking the first 4, and then the 2 FDA-related ones Yasmin will take afterwards. But in 2024, we had items that impacted hepatitis B in several different places. So within screening access, vaccine access, as well as the regulations that sort of govern it. These are not the only important things that happened in 2024. In fact, some of these were picked more because they are technical things that not everyone are necessarily familiar with. So we wanted to take this opportunity to help educate. Nor were all of these things that the foundation or the coalition were necessarily leaders in or involved in. More just that we understand it's going to be impacting those of you on this session, and so wanted to take the opportunity to educate when we had something to educate about. So we're gonna start in the upper left, and this is so the Medicaid adult core set quality measures. It sounds like a mouthful, but the Medicaid program, which operates in every state as well as many U.S. territories, covers low-income adults for their health care. And states used to be able to elect into different quality measures. Quality measures is essentially ensuring that you're collecting specific data and then comparing that data against what would be considered sort of success or good standard of care in that space, and seeing if you really meet that threshold. There are some perks for Medicaid programs that do quality measures, or at least there were. And in 2024, in the spring, HHS opened up an opportunity for individuals to give comments around hepatitis C quality measures, but also left the door open for hepatitis B to be considered as well. As a result of some really good advocacy across the space, we did get a set of both B and C quality measures approved. For hepatitis B, they are screening specific, and it's just 3 of them. It is seeing what the screening level is for all adults, for all pregnant persons, so looking at a very specific subset, as well as those experiencing opioid use disorder. And so that could be defined in a couple different ways. One way is they are an active treatment for opioid use disorder. We had advocated for some triple panel measures as well as some vaccine and treatment measures, but that's a really tough threshold to get. We were excited though to hear that even though B was kind of offered as like, and if you have B, you can provide comments on it. We were really thrilled to hear that because of the public outpouring of support around hepatitis B screening measures, we were able to get those approved. So once those were approved kind of internally last year, they sent it out to states to pilot just to see, how states would be able to implement it and be able to kind of learn the ins and outs in order to ensure this is a quality measure that can be implemented nationwide. Um, and so with that, they gathered information, and there's sort of this final approval meeting coming up next month, early next month, where there'll be an opportunity for other public comment, and we are planning to support that. It really is kind of the final hurdle, and in many cases, the hard part's already done when it comes to quality measures, but we certainly want to make sure that we see it through. From there, these quality measures aren't being included until the 2027 measures. They really do plan out Medicaid and Medicare items years in advance, usually. The nice thing about that, though, is with the quality measures, it really does take several year rollout. So they'll start working toward that 2027 implementation, following this meeting in February. And then from there, once 2027 is occurring, states are measuring their quality measures. They then can release data. So we likely won't see that data until 2028 and beyond, but it will give us a much better sense of the Medicaid population and what's happening around screening. And while 3 years from now seems like a long time, if we think back 3 years ago, at the level of data we had and how much we've been able to gain more in the last 3 years, I think we're excited for that opportunity. One other piece that we actually hadn't realized until we were getting prepped for this call is that quality measures used to be optional for state Medicaid programs. And last year, there was a new reporting requirement saying states have to report on the quality measures. And so not only will we now be getting this better data in state Medicaid programs as a result of these quality measures, but we're going to get it for every state Medicaid program. Awesome. Okay, I'm going to keep just moving right along so we don't use up too much time. Sorry, I should say, on the items where we, the foundation or the coalition, have done something on helping implement it or providing any sort of public comment that might be published somewhere, I'll make sure to note. So for our Medicaid adult core set quality measures, we provided a template for others to use if they wanted to get in information. But we also submitted our own comments, and you can find those comments on the Hepatitis B Foundation's website. If you have any questions, just drop them into the Q&A box, and we'll make sure to hit them up towards the end or as we're doing some transitions. So the next item that happened in 2024 that will potentially have an impact for 2025 is the new Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists case definitions. So the CSTE is the group that each state's and territories epidemiologists belong to, and they really work on, it's where they come together and figure out how they're going to govern their science, essentially, like what their definitions are, how to report what's happening in their states in a way that folks can make apples to apples or orange to orange comparisons across state borders, essentially. Um, Several years ago, they went through the process of updating the hepatitis C case definition, and then in 2023, updated the hepatitis B case definition. In February of 2024, the CDC approved that new definition and provided guidance to the states to start following that. Um, oh, thank you, Darcy. Going back to the adult core set quality measures, I think I forgot or I don't think I made that connection, but Darcy Cherlin from HHS has just said in the chat that the Hep B and C quality measures would be under voluntary reporting. So every state won't have to report on it, but we'll still be getting better data than we potentially do now, and still certainly a win. Thank you for that. On the CSTE case definitions, so CDC in February approved the use of those definitions and worked with several states, 7, I believe, to look at what their 2022 data would have looked like with the case definition that was being used versus the new one, and really showed kind of how cases would shift and how we would be able to more accurately determine where cases were coming from and if they were acute or chronic. That rollout is still occurring. We understand that there's still technical assistance going to states as states need to adjust accepting core data and some of the other pieces. But the hope is that when surveillance reports for 2024 and 2025 and beyond come out, which would be 2026 at the earliest, that those surveillance reports would give new and more accurate data about how hepatitis B exists within states, and hopefully also come with some demographic information as more surveillance reports have been covering that. So again, a change from last year that the hope is better and more accurate data as a result. Coming up to the upper right is an area that we were supportive of, but was really led by others, but has a potential to be very impactful, and that is Medicare Preventive Services roster billing. So this is a very technical and wonky issue that has the ability to be very impactful depending on how some of these services are delivered. So this push for around roster billing allows for unvaccinated or folks who don't know their vaccine status on Medicare, so we're talking primarily 65 and older, to be able to get their hepatitis B vaccines, as well as some other preventive services, at no cost sharing, which is highly important, especially given ACIP's recommendation around hepatitis B's vaccine. It also opens up the ability for these individuals to get that vaccine from pharmacies, and for those pharmacists for those pharmacies to be reimbursed in a way that is similar to the mechanisms in which they're reimbursed for flu and COVID. So if we're looking to normalize hepatitis B vaccine in the way that flu and COVID and pneumococcal are normalized, this is going to be very helpful. The fact that we'll be able to tell seniors, hey, go to the pharmacy to get your X, Y, and Z, and that Z being really B, just really opens up a ability to access services in a more easy way. And then coming down to the last one that I'm going to talk about, this is a piece of litigation, or it's a court case, I should say. So this is Becerra versus Braidwood, and Braidwood versus Becerra. So this was a court case that was ruled on in 2022, and essentially it was an employer who did not feel like they should be required to pay for pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV or PrEP. They didn't believe in providing care that could be provided to someone in a same-sex relationship. They thought it violated their religious rights, and a district court did rule that the foundations of the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force appeared unconstitutional. This is important because the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force is how preventive services have been handled in the country, and more so since the rollout of the Affordable Care Act in 2010. So really, for the last 15 years, the ability for preventive services, for vaccination, and some of the ways that we have been able to vaccinate more individuals in a low or no cost sharing way could potentially, like, insurers may not have to cover those services anymore. This was particularly concerning because it not only went after the Preventive Services Task Force, which handles a whole array of items, but it also went after the ACIP Council on the Advisory Council on Immunization Practices, which approve vaccine schedules. So the case was ruled on in 22. It was immediately appealed, and the appeals court affirmed the district court ruling about the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, but actually said that ACIP was okay. That ruling was then appealed to the Supreme Court, and actually just earlier this month, that was cert was granted. So that means the Supreme Court does believe there is still a question to be answered in that case, and are willing to hear arguments. That does not guarantee a ruling. They could send it back down or provide some other guidance, but more often than not, cases that are granted cert then go on to have some sort of ruling, and usually those rulings are released in June or October. The concern here is that one of the key pieces that many of us in the public health space use to provide no or low cost sharing services, especially around infectious diseases, would eventually no longer be there. But this is very much a kind of a wait and see, but does, of all these things on the screen currently, would have the largest impact moving forward. All right, let's move it over to my colleague, Dr. Yasmin Ibrahim. Yasmin.
Thanks, Frank. Is it okay if I do a quick deep dive into how this all started with the point of care testing, just very quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And Shreya, I think we can probably stop screen share as well, because
I don't
FDA is
have
not. Yeah. FDA, like Yasmin is the slide when it comes to FDA. So yeah, go for it.
I am the slide, exactly. Thank you so much. So hi, everyone. This is Yasmin Ibrahim, work with the Hepatitis B Foundation. And just as a quick dive into the history, I wanted, as I was preparing for this, I wanted to remember and point out when we started this discussion many, many years ago, but actually working with the FDA, gosh, it was back in 2022. So we did meet with them. We did bring our concerns as a community and how the triple panel and how the hepatitis B classification right now as a class 3 does make or create a lot of difficulty for accessing screening, and answered a lot of questions. And I would pause here very quickly and just say that the diagnostic tests are classified into class 1, 2, or 3 based on how sophisticated they are and who can perform them. And the highest is 3, which is the case for hepatitis B, which means it requires more vetting when it comes to approving the tests that are available for use, and also higher costs for companies to apply for this. A different process for clinical trials, and also requires that a trained person, meaning a lab technician, performing this test. So it makes it really very difficult to introduce a point of care test for hepatitis B into the US market, despite the fact that many are available outside, and one of them is actually received WHO pre-qualification. CE mark means approved in the European Union, and another one has WHO pre-qualification only. So there are good and proven point of care tests for hepatitis B out there, just not in the US. So we started the discussion, meetings, emails. We actually submitted a very well prepared dossier with evidence about the impact of reclassification of hepatitis B test on the availability and accessibility of testing to hepatitis B, and how early diagnosis affects or has a huge impact on hepatitis B linkage to care, treatment, and health outcomes, and how making hepatitis B screening and diagnostic available and more accessible would impact very special populations like immigrants, minority populations, people who use drugs, etc. This is all 2022. In 2023, we did the FDA hosted a public meeting for a public committee to discuss hepatitis B testing reclassification, along with other two tests for other infectious disease. And we did submit a public comment. We participated in the public hearing with an oral presentation or an oral comment. We were approved for that. And the just for everybody, this committee usually is formed of ID specialists and with a patient voice as well. And the FDA team listens to the committee, and the committee makes a recommendation but doesn't really tell the FDA what to do. So they usually issue at the end of the meeting a recommendation. It's not what to do. The FDA eventually decides what to do. So the committee did recommend the reclassification of qualitative and quantitative hepatitis B surface antibody tests, quantitative DNA tests, and qualitative hepatitis B surface antigen test, but not the quantitative hepatitis B surface antigen test. And we're not really sure why. It was very clear that they didn't really, or the committee members in the discussion didn't really consider all the therapeutics in the pipeline that are really heavily relying or focusing in the time being on quantitative surface antigen as a good marker. This is kind of like the rising star. Anyway, so we were a little bit disappointed, and we did submit another comment after the public hearing referring to this particular issue. Moving to 2024, we did meet with the Center for Diagnostic Health, for Diagnostic and Radiological Health, that is responsible for this action, a couple of times to reiterate the importance of this action, answer questions they may have. It was an ongoing conversation, really, mainly from our side. Maybe highlighting the community perspective, implementation issues, specificity and sensitivity. And when the FDA finally proposed the rule, I think in September or October of last year, the HBF led another collective effort to submit public comment. There was one from HBF, from the Hepatitis B Foundation, another one from Hep B United. So thank you everyone who participated in that, and thanks Frank for leading this. And also individuals both in the US and globally, which I think was another added value, participated also in this effort to solve some. The global voice, I think, added more strength as well, because even though this is a very US focused issue, we all know that both therapeutics and diagnostics for products that are approved in the US see more focus and interest from developers for research and development, for more the process usually goes faster in terms of research and development and more updates and more technology. So I think there was also a global interest in this move, which we were able to show to the FDA. Um, we also connected with the FDA regarding hepatitis delta test development and what are the best approaches for delta testing clinical trials, especially at health fairs and community health fairs. But this is a different story. But just as I move through the timeline of everything we did, and towards the final quarter of 2024, the Center for Diagnostic and Radiological Health, the CDRH, connected us with RadX ITAP team for hepatitis B testing clinical trials. And I think everyone might be aware of RadX ITAP, but I'm happy to give a quick brief. This is an independent body initiated or charged by NIH, started during COVID-19 pandemic to work on a speedy process, speedy but rigorous, because it's not really compromising the quality of producing well-vetted point of care tests for COVID-19. And they did a great job and phenomenal job, and point of care testing and at home testing was available pretty quickly. And with that, they were then charged with moving to hepatitis C point of care testing, and the first hepatitis C point of care testing was approved last year, and now they are charged for hepatitis B. And so the plan is for hepatitis B surface antigen qualitative point of care test to clinical trials to happen sometime this year, hopefully, if everything goes as planned, and potentially have an approved point of care test for hepatitis B surface antigen sometime towards the end of 2025, fingers crossed. Also notable to mention that the plan is to run most of these clinical trials in community health clinics and federally qualified health clinics. And I think this is a great perspective, and of course, as feasible. It's, in my opinion, this is a win-win situation where clinical trials are conducted where people with hepatitis B usually go for their care and there is much needed, there is high need for these tests. And at the same time, like the sample size and the numbers are, hopefully it wouldn't take long to collect the required sample size for these trials. But also, this is a great opportunity for capacity building for clinical trials and training for clinicians and staff in these centers. And so maybe another stepping point or step for hepatitis B therapeutics clinical trials to actually eventually happen in these places, because this is what we're really missing at this point, is to introduce these clinical trials in federally qualified health clinics and community clinics. As a benefit, this without doubt would improve access to hepatitis B virus testing and diagnosis and potentially care and prevention. I'm happy to share, I can send Shrey and Frank a couple of publications that are done globally on the impact of point of care testing in different population groups and how it improved the access to diagnosis in many of these communities, and so that they share it with everybody. We all know that once an individual is screened and diagnosed, then comes the linkage to care and prevention for their community, household, and everybody around them. So this is a benefit, but also comes with a challenge along the way, like what would be the price of these tests, for example, who would be covering this price, and availability and scalability, and how health insurance will play a part in this process and in care cascade. And and finally, as usual, diagnosis without proper linkage to care creates a lot of hassle and a lot of stress in everyone's life. So I hope I covered most of the aspects. I'm happy for any questions or discussions. I just wanted to say with this final line that the story doesn't end with having an available and approved or cleared FDA cleared point of care test. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, probably some of it actually even before having the test. But it's not the story, or the work doesn't end there. The work just begins actually to make sure that those who need the test really get like have access to it, and then they are linked to care, and their community and households are also receive the proper counseling and prevention. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Yasmin. We have 10 minutes left, and no one has submitted a question into the chat. Does anyone have any that they want to drop in there real quick? I'd like to think it's because we were just so detailed. Well, I will, as folks hopefully submit something, I will just say around point of care testing, yes, but you're absolutely right. It is not like we get a point of care test and then immediately the world changes. That being said, it will be interesting to have better information about some of the communities that are afflicted by Hep B that don't necessarily get the screening or have other barriers to screening that point of care or just non-blood draw based testing mechanism. So not even point of care, but like a finger prick sort of testing mechanism being more easily accessible. How that could positively impact us getting data about how bad hepatitis B is in like let's say the PWOD community or some of the uninsured immigrant and migrant communities that may be reticent to see healthcare at the moment. Excuse me for leaning over this way. I had someone who just insisted on trying to come join me.
Frank, you bring a great point because I probably missed saying that point of care testing, the notion or the idea is definitely not a blood draw. So to move from blood draw to a finger prick. So this is definitely the case. The other thing I would highlight is it's just not only special populations. Point of care test for hepatitis B would have a great impact on hepatitis C elimination plan, the test and treat. For other elimination plans, it intersects with other elimination plans and efforts for scaling up treatment for HIV, elimination of TB. All of these policies definitely intersect with hepatitis B, and all of these populations need to be tested for hepatitis B either before starting the treatment or as a protocol, and that definitely having a rapid test for hepatitis B will support all these policies and efforts.
We have a question from Karen Jobu. Is point of care testing available for antibody and antigen?
The recommendation of the committee last year is to reclassify hepatitis B, quantitative and qualitative hepatitis B antibody, and only qualitative hepatitis B surface antigen. And for hepatitis B antibody, it did not only specify surface or core. So this is the committee recommendation. The final ruling didn't really is not issued by the FDA yet, but the proposed ruling that was issued by the FDA last year did mention both quantitative and qualitative hepatitis B antibody and qualitative surface antigen. So far, the discussion is about for the clinical trials that did not start yet for surface antigen. but the ruling will be there, hopefully, once issued.
Your point about it really just being a more easily accessible diagnostic tool for all is really a good one. And a lot of this effort around the hepatitis B point of care test has happened in the last 2.5 years, simultaneously with White House efforts around hepatitis C treatment. And part of the reason why this test really is now so close to being launched in the US is that it was a barrier to getting Hep C treatment initiation started same day, which was a goal. But that same barrier exists right now around hepatitis B vaccination. The kind of gold standard would be screen, get the results, then start your vaccine series. But we also recognize we don't want to lose folks, and so a point of care rapid test would be helpful on being able to maybe do that first vaccine dose. But it's also good for other things that require a test like PrEP initiation. So for the ability for folks to walk in and be able to walk in, say they want to do a PrEP initiation, get their point of care tests, and then turn around within an hour and walk out with PrEP or linkage into other care because the test showed something they weren't expecting. Really is going to help us as a public health entity or entities catch more positive cases and catch more negative cases that will then be able to go and vaccinate. And so, yeah, just very excited about how much easier other service delivery becomes, which will then also benefit us in terms of impact. I'm also looking forward to, I would love to see with point of care or sort of finger prick testing being more relevant or prevalent, I should say. I'm hopeful that means we get more tests and therefore have even higher quality surveillance data coming in from states and from CDC. And so it's not only like, hey, these tests are being run through a new case definition, but we have way more tests being run through this case definition. And instead of having some states only reporting a few dozen cases where we know for a fact more have happened on the ground there, it just didn't kind of get connected. Being able to have an actual better representative prevalence of what's happening on the ground for B. We have just a couple minutes left. Is there anyone that has a burning question they want to make sure gets answered? Yasmin, any additional notes you want to flag for others?
Happy to answer any thoughts or questions, and even after the call, if anyone has any question, feel free to send it to Shreya and Frank, and we can all try to answer it together.
That yes, we are always happy to be a resource, and I was looking at my slide deck here. Well, we will get wrapped up just a couple minutes early. Thank you all. We had more than 40 folks attend today. I really appreciate that. It is sometimes those January webinars are tough to know how many folks are going to show up. So really appreciate those who came. This recording and the slides will be sent out through our newsletter and be posted on our website, likely tomorrow, actually. And our next session is on March 18th at 3 p.m. We'll hope to have a topic announced sooner rather than later. And as Yasmin said, any questions you may have about this session or other things related to Hep B, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Shreya or Yasmin herself. But other than that, just thank you again and have a good rest of your Tuesday. See you, everyone.